Avalanche Geography is a 10-credit course. The learning outcomes, there are 4. 1, to evaluate avalanche terrain to apply hazard evaluation. 2, to apply hazard evaluation to risk mitigation planning. 3, recognize and evaluate human factors influencing planning and decision making to interact with avalanche terrain. And 4, apply appropriate risk mitigation methods to terrain based on hazard evaluation and context within the scope of practice. The indicative content of this course, Avalanche Geography, is to be able to identify avalanche terrain and relate it to the likelihood of triggering and the consequence of an involvement. Identify terrain using the Avalanche Terrain Exposure Scale, or ATES. Describe terrain travel and operational planning concerns in relation to avalanche hazard evaluation. Describe other trip planning considerations and contingencies, including standard operating protocols, emergency procedures, and equipment. Identify possible human factors influencing planning and decision making and their impact. Identify risk reduction strategies to mitigate significant human factor influences on decision making. Identify avalanche terrain travel and appropriate operational risk mitigation strategies given the sector context. And lastly, identify scope of practice. What can you do with this qualification and what's beyond your scope? How this is assessed is 90% is working in terrain and being evaluated in terrain by moving through it in a simulated, well, it's actually, we bring you to the terrain, we run you through a set of criteria about the danger of the day. You work off a photograph and describe how you would move through the terrain, some of your concerns in and about it, whether it's applicable to the danger that you've been given, some of the things you'd be looking for, where you might test for it, safe spots in the terrain, and the like. More can be found in the rubric of this and also the exam template. And 10% is the written exam, which allows us to have a look at what you might do in conditions that we don't get to test you in. Both of those criteria are must pass. The written exam concentrates on the third outcome, which is recognize and evaluate human factors which influence planning and decision making to interact with terrain. Course 3, Meteorology and Snowpack Influences. 3 learning outcomes. 1, summarize meteorological information from a variety of sources. 2, collect, record, and communicate field meteorological data to current industry practice. And 3, correlate the weather and terrain effects as modifiers of snowpack. Indicative content on this is to basically be able to identify weather information from a variety of sources and then interpret that information. And then summarize relevant information and come up with trends that are happening with the weather. Also to be able to collect, record, and communicate field weather observations. Lastly, what we want you to be able to do in this course is to understand how terrain and weather alter the snowpack. So how the assessment of this course goes is it's 3-tiered. 1 is your ability to look at weather maps and interpret what they're telling you. That's 40% of your course, and it's a must pass. Then another 40% is field weather observations, your ability to go out in the field and collect the information to a professional standard. And lastly, for 20% is a written exam, which is a must pass at 50%. And that is your focuses on how terrain and weather affect the snowpack. The 4th course of the Avalanche Risk Management Level 5 is Avalanche Search and Rescue. There's 3 learning outcomes to this. It's a 5-credit course. And the first one is demonstrate knowledge of avalanche search and rescue skills to participate in a small party rescue. The second outcome is demonstrate avalanche transceiver search skills to current industry standard. 3. Apply search and rescue skills by participating while mitigating risk in a small party rescue. Some of the content that we cover in this, as you'd think, it has everything to do with how you find someone and organize a rescue. So that's demonstrate transceiver search, probe, and shovel technique proficiency, describe effective leadership skills, describe methods used to effectively evaluate and mitigate risks during an avalanche rescue, demonstrate knowledge of the structure and roles of a larger scale multi-agency type rescue to industry practice in relation to small party rescue, describe other search methods that are used besides just transceiver search, which is like visual, organizing a probe line, spot probing. And lastly, describe appropriate patient care and triage methods for avalanche victims. The assessment on this course is 60% weighted on your transceiver search ability, which is a practical demonstration. Another 20% practical demonstration of your small party participation safely and effectively, and another 20% that involves a written exam. Most of those are done in a practical, well, both of those practical assessments are done during the practical week near the end, and the written exam on the last day of the practical course. Good luck.